said. And as I've said, I always start meetings on time. So I'm glad you're here. Welcome to the WAVE program on sponsorship revenue for villages. There are 55 people who registered. I don't know if they'll all show up. The rain is certainly going to keep them indoors, so that might help. But it certainly shows the interest in this very important topic. This is the third of our series this year of what we call mutual support sessions, where villages can share and learn from each other. The videos and slides from the two previous programs on recruiting volunteers and multi-generational villages are available on WAVE's website, wavevillages.org, under WAVE programs, and then archive of WAVE events. Today's session will also be recorded, and the video and slides will be posted on the archive page within a few days. And I'll put that information into the chat in a little bit. So our speakers today are Bruce Rosenthal and Donna Phillips Mason of North Bethesda Village. Bruce is a strategic advisor and a consultant on sponsorship fundraising for nonprofit organizations, and he's the convener of the Partnerships Professional Network. Donna is vice president of North Bethesda and has held leadership positions in the National Council on Aging, and she was the director of public-private partnerships for the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services. So Bruce or Donna, I don't know which of you will take it away, but I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Mary Jo. Let me pull up the slides. Second. Can you see the slides now?
We can see all. We can see the single slide, but we can also see the list of slides.
All right, let me get the. Sorry, 1 second.
There you go.
Great. All right. So thanks for coming to our session on sponsorship revenue for villages. Let me jump in with the first introduction, which Mary Jo has kind of covered. So I've worked with nonprofit organizations throughout my career. I was involved in kind of the startup of both Silver Spring Village and North Bethesda Village. And then the last 7 years, I've been a consultant helping a lot of organizations of all different sizes, large and small, with their sponsorship revenue programs. And one of the things that actually informs a lot of what I talk about now, my colleagues and I, when we work with organizations, talk to about 100 sponsors a year doing interviews with them. So we have a real good sense of what companies are looking for and what they're not looking for. And we'll talk about some of those things during the session. Donna?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Bruce. So I am Donna Phillips Mason, and up until January, I was a board member of North Bethesda Village. Now I am emeritus, sort of a status they created for me because I have had a long history of creating partnerships with businesses for the National Council on Aging, for Leadership Montgomery, for the American Muslim Senior Society. So for numerous organizations where I approach my vision with what can we do next to increase partnerships, relationships, and revenue. So I love working with Bruce, who has a very savvy business approach to this topic. I'm more sort of your village person because I've worked with a village, several villages, and sort of understand the barriers and also the complexity of developing this kind of program. Bruce.
Thanks, Donna, and thanks for pointing out the differences and the similarities in our backgrounds, and hopefully that will help inform the discussion. So the learning objectives for today, we're going to talk about how sponsorships can provide revenue and programming, and how to create a value proposition for your village. Because as I said, when I talk to companies, they're really looking for value, not just to give away money. So we need to figure out how to identify for each village, asking companies and businesses for money what the value proposition is. And we're going to recognize there are some barriers. As Mary Jo mentioned before we started, there are a lot of villages that have been hesitant to do fundraising and sponsorship fundraising. So we'll identify some of those barriers and how to overcome them, and then talk about next steps. And I know we want to create this as more of a conversation, so we'll try to go through these slides pretty quickly. And then if you note any questions, then we can turn off the PowerPoint and have a discussion about questions. So if you want to jot into the chat what you think your village's biggest challenge is when it comes to increasing revenue from sponsors. And we'll keep moving into the PowerPoint, but if you want to jot those down, then we can go back to the chat during the discussion and address some of those challenges that you're facing. So what is your village's biggest challenge when it comes to increasing revenue from sponsors?
Yeah, and I can jump in and say for our village, it was really having the expertise and comfort with approaching sponsors.
Mm.
And
Yep.
I see some other people are talking about getting started. How do you get started with this? Not enough time to do this. So I think we get to at the end, we talk about steps to doing this, Bruce, within
Yep.
Working with your board. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So, yeah, why is getting sponsors so hard? And from the work that Donna's done with a lot of organizations over the years and that I've done, one of the big challenges, there are more and more organizations asking the same businesses for support. So whether one is asking for a few $100s or tens, or in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars in sponsorship support, when I talk to the companies, they're saying, we hear from 5 organizations a week, 20 organizations a month. So there's just a lot of competition out there of other organizations that are all very worthy and all are trying to make a case. But that's why we need to talk about that value proposition. So when we just go to a business and say, well, I'm with the local village, we need money, that's why it's often not resonating with companies. And I'm also finding companies are really scrutinizing funding requests. And again, whether it's a small local business that's doing several $100,000 or several $100 sponsorships, or big companies, when I talk to the companies, they're really measuring what do they get back from that? Are they getting new business? Are they getting the type of visibility they're looking for? So more and more companies are not just saying, oh, we better give some money to everybody who comes in and asks for money. They're really, in fact, I'm talking to companies that are giving away the same amount of money they have in previous years, but they're cutting the number of organizations that they support by a third or by a half. So the companies are still interested in sponsorships, but not to every organization that knocks on their door.
Bruce,
Yeah.
When I get of some of the village, they talk comfortable asking.
Donna, you're breaking up terribly. Donna, I don't know what's happening, but you're breaking up.
Yeah. Okay, is this better? Any better?
No, it's not better at all.
Oh.
No.
Okay, I'll let Donna work on that for a minute, and I'll move on to the next bullet point. And the other reason why this is so hard is that the very typical benefits. So when I talk to companies and when folks come and say, well, sponsor our event and thanks for your support, or we'll put your logo on the slide in the PowerPoint, or we'll put your logo on the sign near the door. Those typical benefits are not really resonating with companies, and they don't really see the value in that. So those are some of the big barriers from the company standpoint that we're trying to overcome. As we said, let's address the risks. So there are a lot of board members that don't like fundraising. And I think that makes sense. There is certain fear in going in and asking for money. But what we find with successful sponsorship programs, it's really not going in and asking for money. It's making the case for, this is a really important village. Your company really has some information or expertise, and we'll talk about some examples in a few minutes. But it's really more of a conversation with businesses or companies about the value of your village. And any board member should be able to, almost that elevator conversation, if you run into somebody and they say, oh, tell me about the village. That's really what the relationship building that Donna and I are talking about with businesses and companies. So it's really more of a conversation. It's not, let's go in and ask for money.
Yeah. Recently, someone told me that they went in and asked a national local business that has a national approach to give them money, period, without a relationship, without any research, without anything, and not even demographic information on the membership. I think that's a problem. Anybody has to be armed with a lot of comfort, ease, and information.
Yep, definitely. And there's also a fear, and this is true for all sizes of not-for-profits and other organizations asking for money. There is a fear that sponsors will make sales pitches. And that is a very legitimate fear. And I think that's where it's up to those of us who work with organizations and are seeking funding to say to companies, this is not a sales pitch. If you want to buy an ad, if we have ads in our newsletter, or if you want to buy a booth, if we have an annual event, you can do that and sell to your heart's content. But organizations should be looking for sponsorships that are based on educating, not selling. So if a company just wants to hand out brochures and talk about discount coupons, and that's fine if a company wants to give you discount coupons for restaurant meals or whatever, but high level, higher dollar sponsorships are not based on sales pitches. And in some cases, I've said to companies, sorry, this is not a good partnership at this point. If you want to sell, then that's not really a sponsorship. Let's part as friends and talk about it at a later date. There's also a fear that the village will lose its identity. And that's kind of tied back to the sales pitches. Will this become just a sales approach where we'll have all these sponsors selling things? This is still about village comes first. Actually, village members come first, and the village's mission comes second. So it is all about members and the integrity of the village. And if any sponsor starts pushing the requests or the relationship in a different direction, again, that may not work. So companies need to understand that this is all about the members and the integrity of the village. And as Donna was saying earlier, there's a lack of understanding about how to approach companies and businesses and potential sponsors. So just knocking on their door and saying, I'm with the village, we're having an event, could you give us a few $100s for our event? We're going to talk about other ways to approach potential sponsors. Donna, anything else on that slide?
No, except, as we get further along, I have two great case examples of success that I'd like to bring forward. But Bruce, let's move on. One of the things I saw in the chat, though, was one of the villages has a lot of government employees, and they are cautious because of, the government had restrictions on relationships and sponsorships. So they bring that reluctance to the village. And so overcoming that reluctance to have partnerships and relationships with businesses is important. And we'll talk later about whether this implies an endorsement. So the difference between relationships, partnerships, and endorsements are important.
Definitely. So we're really looking at a new model for sponsorship success. So as I said, it's not so much our village needs money, give us money, we'll put your company's logo on a sign. But it's really thinking about partnerships and not sponsorships, and thinking about relationships and truly partnering with companies. I have another slide in one of my other presentations where I say partner is a noun and a verb, and we often use it in this context as a noun, and we say, oh, that company is a partner, but are we really partnering with them and identifying what the company's goals are, what the village's goals are, and how those come together, and how it's a win-win for everybody, and mostly a win for members. And again, from my discussions with a lot of companies that sponsor organizations, companies really want to be part of the activity, not just the sponsor of the activity. So again, when we go to companies and say, well, if you sponsor our event, we'll put your name on the sign, versus saying, wow, is there a way your company could be part of this event? Not to sell, but to add value or to be a speaker on a panel. So that's where companies see the real value, being part of the activity, not just sponsoring the activity. There we go. So our three-step process and as Mary Jo said, these slides will be available, so you don't need to write everything down unless you want to jot down questions. So first step, as I try to advance the slide here. So step one is interestingly not starting with what the companies want, but starting with what the village needs. So I think this also helps with board members' concern, members who are former government employees' concerns. This is starting with what the village needs. So of course, villages need revenue, but villages often need interesting programming. So when I look at the calendars for Silver Spring Village and North Bethesda Village that I've been affiliated with, there are a whole range of topics that members are interested in, and probably even more topics than are currently available. So starting by, what are we hearing from members? What do they want to know more about? So this is very member focused. And developing a list of all those topics, and not that we'll find a sponsor for all of them, but starting with what are all the things that members need. And I'll just mention this fourth bullet point, and Donna can talk more about it because she's really good at this, is knowing the demographics of your village. So when you go to a company, you can say, here are our members, and not just our members, but here is our reach. So we're on Facebook and we're reaching all these other folks. They're not all members, or we're reaching members and their families. So a lot of villages understandably don't have thousands of members, but villages have a much larger reach than just their membership. Donna, you want to talk more about demographics?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think also one of our needs for villages is to get, quote, younger participants. And we recently, our village actually started having a mahjong program at a library, and it was free. And we had a volunteer who taught the mahjong program, and we attracted younger people who were, when I say younger, I'm talking about 50s and 60s, into our village. They didn't know anything about the village. We partnered with the library. These people came, and our task is to create a membership that is younger as we develop services, and also more comfortable making contacts with businesses, because a lot of them are very computer savvy. So that's something us older members of the village didn't have. So our demographics become more attractive to a car dealership or to a wine store. And I'll talk about that later. So not only do we need to increase our revenue, but we need to be able to attract people who may help us with this sponsorship approach. And often they're people who are tech savvy, and they can do the research that we need to do before we approach any business about the benefits of the relationship. Thanks, Bruce.
Great. So step one was identifying your village's needs and demographics. And step two is then identifying the businesses and companies that can fulfill those needs. So again, I think this helps with board members or members who are concerned about, where is this going? Are we endorsing? No, we're starting with what are the village's members' needs, and then finding companies that have not just products and services, but expertise. So some of this will make a little more sense when Donna and I talk about some of the examples that she mentioned, but we're not going to a company and saying, could you just give us a discount, or you can you can hand out the brochures for whatever your product or service is, but focusing on what the companies are smart about and how they could be on a webinar like this and not be selling anything, but talking about their expertise. And also considering whether those companies want to reach the village's audience. So once you've identified those demographics, and then you can go to a company and say, well, it seems like based on what your company is selling, maybe you'd like to reach our audience. Here's who our members are, and here's who the people are who we reach on Facebook. And to do the research on those companies and identifying the decision maker in advance. So let me let Donna talk a little more about that, because she's really good on the research, and is the example she mentioned earlier of knowing, is this a local company? Is this a national company? Who's going to make the decision about a sponsorship? Donna?
Yeah, actually, I have, I hate to jump into an example, but I have to give one. Prior to this, I did a little survey of villages in Montgomery County about what they were doing with sponsorship. And I have to give credit to Little Falls Village, because I got a fabulous example from Doran, the executive director, of what they do and how they approach villages. And I just wanted to share that with you. They actually look at local businesses. And so an agency, they had a member who was very involved in the village, but actually she was a caregiver and developed her own agency. And so she was already involved in the village. So she developed her own agency. Her agency had a wonderful reputation. So the second step was, it was a local business. and it had a wonderful reputation. So that's really important. No fly by night. And we know in the aging network space, there are many competing businesses trying to get seniors' attention. And so being prudent about who we work with is very important, especially if you're going to a senior related business. And then finally, this business had something to share with the village. So this business actually donated staff to do webinars. They did volunteer recruitment. So the benefit to the village was that they worked with a local company who had a great reputation, who donated funds, but also donated staff time to do programming. So the three-prong approach I thought that Little Falls Village used to increase what they could offer was pretty savvy. And so my hat's off to this village. So that's an example.
Yeah, so it's a great example because it also touches on the concern we mentioned earlier about endorsement. So there was nothing that you talked about, Donna, because what you did talk about was education, outreach. There was no hint of the village saying, oh, this is the best product, or you should go buy their service. So again, when we focus on what does the village members need, what do the companies have to offer around that expertise or participating in a webinar or getting the word out, there's never a discussion of endorsing a product or service.
No.
All right. So step 3 is contacting the company. So as we said, it's not going knocking on the door of that local business saying, oh, we have an event coming up. We need $300. Could you give us $300? Because that's when businesses are usually saying, well, yeah, we've heard from 3 other people today, not interested. So it's really seeking that conversation with the business's decision maker and to talk with each company about truly partnering to showcase the company's expertise, not so much their product or service. So it's how much can the company talk about what they are really smart about, and whether it's a wine store or a car dealer, or we'll give you a list of 8 or 10 of them in a couple slides, but how could the company talk about what they are smart about without ever mentioning their product or service? Now, the company's name and logo will still be there, so folks will know where that information is coming from. But especially in this day and age when we're bombarded with so many messages, advertising and email messages and all that, when people will pay attention if a company says, oh, you need to know about, we can provide that information. And then folks will say, wow, that's a really smart company. And that may lead to sales. Sorry, Donna.
Oh, no. Somebody talked about metrics, that sponsors want metrics of benefit. How do you track sales, awareness, or influence? My own sense is you miss the point about relationships. It's really a relationship that you're establishing with a company. And the relationship is not a one night stand. It is a building relationships. So you start small. So I would never say, okay, I can give you 50 people who attend you or whatever, because that's not realistic. You don't know what you're going to deliver. You know that you have this audience. But I do think that we have to be careful to think we can give numbers to businesses when we don't know the nature of the relationship that we want to build. So it's building the relationship. It's not saying this is what I can deliver.
Right. I think, and further, not only not being able to guarantee what you can deliver, but also definitely not guaranteeing any sales. So even when I work with companies that sponsor big associations, $100,000 sponsorships, the company is responsible for sales. I'm not responsible for their sales. I can work to deliver an audience to them and position their company as an expert, but it is up to each company to guarantee sales. So even when companies say, well, I'll sponsor if you can guarantee me 10 new customers or 3 new contracts, that's, as Donna's indicating, that's not a discussion. That's not a partnership. And kind of the point Donna just made, that the one-time events, one-time sponsorships have limited value for sponsors. And there's something I learned years ago in a class on marketing, that people need to hear a message 7 times before it really resonates. So if we can find a way to repurpose content, so if you had the example that Donna mentioned earlier with Little Falls, if a company participates in a webinar and that webinar is then posted on the village's website, and then maybe there's an article in the village's newsletter that summarizes some of the information that the company talked about in the webinar, and then there's a Facebook post about it, then you're taking the same information, because we don't want to create a lot more work for ourselves, but can we take the same information from a company and say, oh, we're not just looking for a sponsorship for this event or for this webinar, we'd like to position your company and get the word out about your company's expertise over the next 6 months. And right there, that's a huge differentiator, because most of the other folks knocking on the door of those businesses are going to say, sponsor our event, we'll put your sign outside the event for 3 hours, and we'll thank you for your support. But if we can go to companies and say, we have a plan to get your visibility about your company's expertise out there for 4 or 5 or 6 months, that's when companies are more interested in that ongoing relationship.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. I have everything isn't a success. I just I saw somebody in the chat talked about how much time this takes to do this kind of work. I think it takes time, but I actually think that you may have people within your own network who have energy and enthusiasm about this work. As Bruce said, you don't need to do 5 or 10 a month. You could do 1 or 2. But having people who are interested in this is important, not people who think this is a horrible chore, because I actually enjoy this. So I find meeting new people and learning about businesses is enriching.
Yep. Really important point, because there are other things villages do. If you're going to plan an event, you can't half plan the event. You got to figure out registration and promotion and who's going to be the speaker and how's the room going to be set up and where's it going to be. You can't half plan it. You got to do the whole thing, and it takes a lot of time. If one wants to launch a sponsorship program, as Donna said, you could reach out to 1 or 2 businesses a month and see how it goes, and then decide to expand it as you have time. So kind of creating that program. So again, if you want to type into the chat any sponsorship success stories or ideas to share, we can talk about those in the discussion in a few minutes. And here's the fun part of the presentation. And a lot of these examples came from Donna when we did this presentation at Village Network last October. Examples of successful village and business partnerships, focusing on expertise, not sales. So the fun part of this is looking at every business in town. And as Donna kind of indicated, it's probably easier with the local businesses, not the big corporate chains where the local business doesn't make a decision on sponsorships. But thinking about and again, all these are expertise, not sales. So could that local travel agency do a presentation or a webinar or an in-person event talking about creative packing or solo traveling? So I'm sure for many villages, if you were to do that, what do people want to know about? Solo traveling for folks who are single is a big deal. Grocery stores and restaurants. So again, we could approach them and say, well, can we get a 5% or 10% discount for folks that come in? But what if the store said, oh, well, let's do a several $100 or $1,000 sponsorship if we can come in and talk about nutrition for seniors or organic foods. Donna, you want to talk about your wine store example with North Bethesda Village?
Sure. Wine store. That was an easy one. Local wine store, Hop and Grape, small. And I've started going in there and meeting with the owner, understanding his business model. I love wine. So it was easy for me to explore what would be in it for the village. And so the village publicizing wine tastings at his store where people came in, socialized. He had a speaker, an expert on wine. So he had the speaker there the speaker was not selling wines, but had various price wines. But what happened? What happened was we had a very social event. The wine store sold lots of wine. And in checking with him recently, he, of course, wants to do more wine tastings, write articles for our newsletters, and is willing to donate to our holiday fund. So, and you know what? I go to that wine store all the time now, and I see people from our village there too. So it was a local relationship, but also it attracted younger people. too. So it had
Mhm.
many bonuses, but another one I think is really interesting is a car. We have many car dealerships near us, and I actually have been talking to one about how hard it is for seniors to understand the new technology in cars. And actually, I did some research because it happened to be a Subaru dealer. And the research about Subarus being the safest cars for seniors. I don't know if somebody said that, Consumer Reports, but anyhow, the Subaru dealer wanted to donate a Subaru to our village. Well, that's not feasible for us because we don't need a car, but we do need to help seniors understand. We do need financial assistance when we can get it. And so so I've met with them for 2 lunches and a tour of their sales people. And I am approaching our board about having a relationship with a local Subaru dealer because I think when you buy a car, you don't even understand how most of the things work and who explains it to you. So I think that's sort of an exciting one for me because they offered to show me how to use the things on our new car. So that was a win-win.
Yep. So I think, so how this kind of would play out. So if we go back to the few slides ago, what do your village members need? What are they interested in? So if the indications that the board members have or from a survey indicates, well, people really need to know about, they're really challenged with understanding their car's technology. Then if the conversation is going to the auto dealer, not saying, oh, we need $500 so you can sponsor our event next month, but going to the auto dealer and saying, we've surveyed our members. They are really challenged with technology. What if we brought 15 of our members into your showroom and you could tell them about technology? So I think at least it's the beginning of a conversation. It's not a fundraising pitch. So back to that barrier we talked about earlier where boards don't want to do fundraising. This is not fundraising. It's going in for a conversation. What is the expertise that the business has that members need? And
Yeah,
then go ahead, Donna.
yeah, Bruce, and also downtime. With the wine store, they had downtime when nobody was coming there because a lot of people come after work or on weekends. So we picked downtimes, and the car dealership is in the same category. Mary Jo pointed out that non-alcoholic wines are important.
Mm.
And Mary Jo, in our next tasting, we're going to have a sampling of non-alcoholic wines. So your point is well taken because lots of people can't drink now. But also the wine store is within walking distance of our zip code, most of the places in our zip code. So most of our people walk to the wine store.
Well, and beers too. I mean, apparently one of
Yes.
the fastest growing beer brands is a non-alcoholic beer, but also low alcohol wine. So it's a combination. And I think it's, as you say, it's educating your members about them. So that's where you get in, not just trying to promote the sales, but letting them know that this exists and where they can find them.
Yeah, thank you for those ideas.
Yeah, those are great. And it just to kind of expand on what you said, Mary Jo, it's really about educating to sell. This will lead to sales, but not going in with the sales pitch. Because again, with the way we can all click delete or mute or whatever, that we don't need the sales pitch. But if companies educate, and again, when I talk to companies, multi-$100,000 sponsors and organizations, they want the opportunity to differentiate themselves by being positioned as what they call a knowledge leader or a thought leader to talk about their expertise. So there are a few other examples on that slide. So it's really thinking about every business within the area of your village. What is the expertise, not the product or service? What is the expertise that store or business has that might be of interest to members? So kind of next steps, we would suggest at your village's next board meeting to talk about and call it a pilot project. Again, sometimes it's like, oh, do we have to launch this big sponsorship program? Talk about it as a pilot project. We're going to reach out to 2 businesses a month for the next few months and see how it goes, or 3 businesses a month for the next 6 months. But talk about it as a pilot project, but start by identifying the village's needs, identifying the members' needs. So it's all focused on the village and the members, not the businesses. And then to talk about how can local businesses help provide revenue and programming to fill those needs. And who would those villages need? And what sort of research do we need to do ahead of time? and to contact those businesses, ideally to set up a conversation. So not going to them through the busiest time on a Saturday morning. Donna might have gone into that wine store during that slow time to talk to the owner or the manager. And that this is very much about relationships, not selling. So I think that goes back to that concern the board members have. Is this selling? Is this fundraising? Is this asking for money? It's really about building relationships and talking to the businesses the same way we would talk to anybody else about the value of the village.
Yeah, I mean, finding people who are enthusiastic about this concept. Many of our villages are focused on service needs and service needs are really going to increase. I haven't seen many pie charts which show how much money is coming from other than membership. And I know some villages like North Bethesda doesn't even have membership. But my own sense is in the future, we'll see more and more villages being called on to provide services. So then the question is, you can't get all of your revenue from membership, so or donations. So when you look at this relationship partnership building as a way to increase revenue, really increase programming, and perhaps increase services, it seems more essential to consider. But finding someone who's enthusiastic about this and who's comfortable with listening, not talking, because I think you have to listen to the business and see what it is their needs are, because you know what your needs are. So you can't go in saying, this is what I need. You have to figure out how to have a conversation that puts on the table both of your needs. And for larger businesses, somebody's asking a question for larger businesses like the giant, like the grocery stores, you have to do research. You may have a relationship with the manager. And I'm fortunate, I have a relationship with the manager of a small chain called Fresh Market. And so that's different when you can go through a relationship to get to the decision maker. But I do think that you have to have people who are interested in this approach, and it can't be forced. That's
Yep.
it.
Yeah, good point about the big stores. And, if you have other stores, I would almost say, if we were to approach, a Fresh Market or a local store within the area of the village compared to Giant, I would go with the local store. Now, I know a lot of us think, oh, Giant, they have tons of money, but it's also a big bureaucracy. And I'm not even sure the local store managers have a pot of money for sponsorship. But to go to a small store or, when Donna went to the wine store, it was a local independent store. So I think organizations have more success sometimes with smaller local businesses than with the bigger chains. So end of PowerPoint, I'm going to put up our contact information slide just for a minute if you want to jot any of that down. And then I'm going to turn off the PowerPoint so we can have a discussion and go through some of the questions in the chat.
Okay, I'm looking at some of the questions. I think someone talked about a presentation the Village to Village Network had, which showed that membership revenue is not the largest source of income for even larger villages. So
Yeah, it wasn't a presentation. It's if people are members of V2V, if members are people who are on this program today are members of V2V, go into the forum section. And this was just in the past couple of weeks that this discussion was in their forum.
Good. I see someone talking about gift certificates they get from Harris Teeter, $30 gift certificates. So, we have, I keep wanting to say to people, take the partnership further. Take the beginning relationship further. Yes, get $30 gift certificate from Harris Teeter. What else can you do with that store, with the people who work there? That's a relationship, but not really. So think about what you could do with them. Have a conversation with them. How can we work together? Maybe to educate our members or to have a special day where we celebrate our volunteers at your store. I mean, come up with some ideas of what you can do as opposed to just getting a $30 gift certificate.
Yep. And it doesn't have to be an either or. The $30 gift certificate, as Donna said, is great. And maybe that's an opportunity to go into the store. This is a good beginning. We have a lot of our members using the gift certificates. They really like your store. Could we build on that? Could you come and do a presentation or a webinar about, nutritious dining or single serve dining for folks who are living alone or whatever, and then turn that into a multi-$100 sponsorship in addition to the $30 discounts? Wendy had her hand up.
Yeah, Bruce, I appreciate the Harris Teeter comment, taking it further. I just wanted to share a funny thing that happened to us this week that was out of the blue. Our Arlington County Treasurer's Office, I guess every quarter picks a nonprofit organization that they encourage their staff to give to, sort of like a smaller version of the federal CFC. And however it happened, we were selected this week. So I've had easily 50 online donations of $26 a piece from Arlington County employees in the treasurer's office. And again, I don't know how they decided to pick us. I will find out from the organizer, but it's just one of those, something out of the blue. For whatever reason, they saw us and picked us, and we're thrilled.
Yeah, but
because we will follow up, and all those people who give to us, and they're giving to us really generously, will be part of our distribution list, and they'll get communications from us and stay on board with things that we're doing.
But Wendy, you've told me several stories about how you come into a network that you didn't even know how you got there, except you had a member who was a member of the women's club or whatever who introduced you.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to look at our own network of members and volunteers and see who knows who. Because Wendy, you've had many stories like that.
Yeah, I actually, so I'll give you two quick stories. One, I think the treasurer's office knew about us because they actually overcharged us at one point, and we got refunds from them for some kind of, personal property tax. So they knew our name. But no, you're right, Donna. There is, sort of a mentor of sorts, this woman who's part of all of these different women's clubs. And it started out with the Arlington Women's Alliance, and then she was a member of something else and a member of something else and a member of something else. And each one of those organizations, she would be the one promoting Arlington Neighborhood Village. And when things came down to a vote, sometimes she was the deciding vote as to would it go here or there. And when we won by one vote, it was because of her. So yeah, and you're right. It's just, as you both have been saying, relationships that you build over time.
Yeah, and when somebody just asked a question about levels of sponsorship. And I know you get fundraising letters and say, if you give 1,000, you're this level and that, don't make it complicated. Don't begin by thinking you have to have all your ducks in a row. Know that when you go into a wine store that's a single person owns, they're not going to give us $2,500. It's using common sense. But over time, when you track the level of sponsorship revenue programming, you can actually monetize it yourself. But I think that's a barrier we put up for ourselves. We have to have all these things in a row so that we can pursue this strategy. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I find companies are less interested in what they're called, but how they're treated and what the relationship is. So actually, there are companies I'm talking to now that have said if they get one more fact sheet that says gold, silver, bronze, platinum levels, they just throw them away because it just looks so standard, so cookie cutter. There's no relationship behind it. So actually, I find that the gold, silver, bronze is a turnoff for many companies. It's go in and develop the relationship, and also we talked about this a little bit before. The question that Karen, sorry if I'm mispronouncing, posted about developing these relationships in individual meetings takes a lot of time. It does. But, it's considering the alternative. There are also villages spending a lot of time putting together fundraising letters and mailing out a lot of, could you sponsor our event and all of that. And as we said, you can start small. And I don't know, so it may have taken Donna a number of hours with that local liquor store, but it's now an ongoing relationship. It keeps building. So the second meeting didn't take as long as the first meeting. And the third meeting might be, we have this idea for doing something else, and it might be a 15-minute conversation. So looking at it over time, and as it relates to the amount of money coming in, It's an investment, but yeah, again, I don't think we can emphasize enough. If you want to start off with a couple outreaches a month and one meeting a month, that's fine.
This is Mary Jo. I'll just jump in. I put something into the chat earlier about it's obvious from the level of reluctance and just lack of knowledge among most villages about this approach that you need to actually develop that interest. And I'm wondering, you said go to your next board meeting and start talking about it, but it seems like you need to spend, a significant amount of time internally first, coming to a consensus and agreeing that this is important so that you've got, hopefully more than just one person and, doing your outreach. And in any case, that person, whether it's one or several, know that they've got the full village behind them. And it's a common conversation that's going on out there. And again, I'm saying that I think that if you just go to your next board meeting and start raising this, do you have any tips for how to introduce it to the village board members themselves, how to sell partnerships to the board and say, reassuring them it's not so much. So what tips would you have there?
Bruce, do you want me to go?
Well, yeah, actually, let me just preface by one thing that a number of comments in the chat on the decreasing percentage of revenue coming from membership. So part of it, this isn't an imperative. This is really important because villages will not be able to expand and grow and thrive based on membership revenue alone, because the 3 or 4 or 5 people that have posted things in the chat, many of the data from Village Network, the percentage of and the amount of membership revenue is decreasing. And of course, there are a number of villages that have no membership fee. So the sponsorship revenue from businesses is really important. So Donna, if you want to talk about how we want to introduce that at a board meeting.
Yeah, I think your point is well taken. Also, looking at the future, I mean, many villages are day-to-day operations, especially if they don't charge any kind of membership fees. Then they're always struggling to use volunteers who burn out. And so, but villages that are established can see the need for services is only going to increase. So making the financial case that, yeah, you may have enough now, but how much can you raise your fees? And can we look at a strategy that would, as Wendy's Village did, 60%, did you say, Wendy, of your revenue comes from other things than membership? So it's, as Bruce said, how do you raise it? You say so you'll have board members who are very much involved in day-to-day operations. That's good. But you'll also have others. And Mary Jo, you only need 2 or 3. You don't need a lot because they'll be stumbling over each other. You only need 2 or 3 who say, let's explore this. We want the board's approval to move forward and explore this. And I know with my village in North Bethesda, they were delighted that I was interested in this because I like it. And I found a volunteer who was interested. So there were only 2 of us really. And yet you don't need a lot of people. You just need people who are enthusiastic and interested. So, but selling the board shouldn't be that difficult, as Bruce said, because the imperative is there.
Right. Yeah, and Mary Beth posted a really interesting idea a few minutes ago. Are any villages members of local Rotary? Because a great way to meet community
What am I
businesses.
doing? I'm talking to you. I'm sitting in front of a.
Hello. Sorry. So I think the idea of, is there a local Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, Neighborhood Business Council, a place like that to go, and maybe even find a way to do a presentation about the village. Because you don't need a whole lot of sponsors. We're not talking about, a dozen sponsors. We're talking about a relatively small number. So I think the idea of going to where the businesses are, Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, Neighborhood Business Council, would be a great way to meet some businesses that would be interested.
But I think, Bruce, I had the experience of listening to village people say, well, I went and nothing happened. I spoke to Rotary and nothing happened. And I always say, when I go to these events, I say I have to meet 2 people who I can follow up with. I just have to meet. I have, it's a job. I have to meet. It's not just going and talking, it's meeting two people I can follow up with. And then it's a success. But just speaking to a group is nothing. It's not necessarily building a long-term relationship, because they get speakers every month.
Yep. Yeah, Kim had posted a really good question that we could spend another hour talking about, is how do you determine what the sponsorship fee should be? And she added, how do we avoid undervaluing the relationship? So I kind of go in there recognizing the village has value, has brand equity. And when Donna and I did this presentation at Village Network last conference last October, somebody said, after listening to Donna talk about the wine tasting, they said, oh, we did something at a local liquor store, and the liquor store charged us for the liquor that they provided for the liquor tastings. And we said, no. If you're bringing those customers into the store and they're going to walk out having bought bottles of liquor or non-alcoholic beverages, you shouldn't be in a position of having to pay for that. So I don't have a real easy answer, but it's kind of understanding what is the business selling, what is their interest from that conversation. And you can always negotiate down, you can never negotiate up. So you can figure out, does this sound like $1,000 or $500? And I think based on that, having built that relationship that Donna's talked about so much and so well, that you put a dollar figure on the table and the business can say, that's crazy, we can't do that, or yeah, that's kind of in the range, could we do something a little less, or what if we did this year and a higher amount next year? So I think when you have that relationship established, it's easier to talk about negotiating the dollar amount.
I agree. You can't begin by asking for money or putting a dollar amount. And somebody just said, oh, this is a lot of work and you don't know how much you're going to get. Well, yeah, but Bruce said sending out fundraising letters where you get what percentage return do you get? And people get weary of fundraising because they get so much. So yeah, you almost have to be intuitive. I mean, I hate to say this. Somebody just said, where do you find someone to do this kind of work in your village? I mean, you have creativity must be a big part of. They may have to be right brain, very creative, because you have to be able to think outside of the box, but have the support of your village and trust that you'll make good decisions that you'll bring to them for their approval. Because I think working with your village leadership is important, but the trust and buy-in by the leadership of this approach is very important. And then you can find one or two people, Mary Jo, that's all you need, who will carry this water. And then when it's successful, more people will want to do it.
Yep.
That seems to, and they may not do it great, but you'll get a cadre of people who not only will go after membership, but will go after relationships as well.
Yep.
Can I throw out also a question actually that just popped into my mind? We know that recruiting and maintaining volunteers is close to one of the number one concerns for villages. And I know villages that have been wonderful about volunteer recognition, dinners, events, etc. Do you think that specifically approaching someone to help underwrite a volunteer appreciation event, does that sound like a good thing that businesses might be interested in sponsoring, or how do you see anything in that direction?
I have a joke. I worked for the National Council on the Aging. The senior centers were offered sponsorship and hosting of volunteer events at casinos, gambling casinos. Do you remember those days when the casinos wanted seniors to come? And and they were going to pay for the whole thing, and some said yes and some said no. I would actually, Mary Jo, I have two very close friends now at local supermarkets, and they both have space that's unused. So I would approach them and say, hey, how would you consider hosting an event here in the afternoon? because they already host mahjong and canasta in these spaces as well.
You said supermarkets. Do you mean libraries?
No, supermarkets.
Supermarkets have room for,
Well, these are local chains who have space.
oh,
And, you know, actually, there's a restaurant I was in recently where they let seniors come and play canasta and mahjong in the afternoon because they have no business.
mm,
So my own sense is I would actually, if I were thinking about hosting, I would talk to them if I had a relationship with them. I wouldn't go in cold, but I would explore with them. We want to recognize our volunteers, and do you have some ideas? So I would do that, but I would have my eye on space that they have that's not used, that they could do it in the afternoon from 1 to like whatever. So I would think about that way.
Yeah, so that's a great idea for another way to recognize volunteers. If you were going to have that gala event, Mary Jo, to recognize volunteers, again, I think businesses are kind of hesitate to underwrite the cost of something because then it's all about the organization. But I think if it's a business that I can't think of exactly what's the right tie-in, if the business could come in and be a speaker
mhm.
at the gala, and maybe the business is a larger firm, maybe it's a large consulting firm that has some of their employees doing volunteer work, and maybe it's somebody from the company's volunteer or HR department that could come in and talk about the importance of volunteers. So they'd be getting the visibility, but as a thought leader for their expertise, not just a sign outside the event that says we sponsored the event or in the program that says we sponsored the event. So again, companies want to be part of the conversation, not sponsor the conversation. So if there's such a role, that would be great. So Barbara had a good question about concerns about having multiple sponsors in the same industry. And I generally don't, they kind of call those exclusives. We're only going to have one wine store or one car dealer. But I think the advantage in letting businesses or inviting businesses to talk about their expertise. So maybe, you know, as Donna said, if they're two car dealers and they both seem to express interest, and maybe one car dealer is talking about, you know, people coming into the showroom to learn about technology in cars, and another car dealer is providing a webinar or a document about how to winterize your car. They're both car dealers, but they're being featured for different expertise. And I think that's kind of the big game changer from years ago when all the gold sponsors got a big sign and all the silver sponsors got a little sign, and kind of the tiered gold, silver, bronze. But if each company is being featured for their expertise. Now, that being said, I guess if Donna were to ask me, oh, should I go to another wine store in the neighborhood? I'd say, let's not do an official exclusive, but don't go to other wine stores. Find other stores to go to.
Right.
But if another wine store came onto the radar screen, I'd say, well, we're doing wine tastings and featuring non-alcoholic wine at this wine store. Can your wine store talk about something else?
Yeah, but Bruce, I do think the issue of in our area in Montgomery County, we have huge numbers of developments for seniors going up, CCRCs. We have a lot, and they're all like having events. And I think that competition, I think you have to tread carefully with that competition. I do, because I actually, you know, people ask me for recommendations where they should move to. And I have my own opinions. But from a village standpoint, I can't recommend one over the other. Although
Right.
I know the ones that are good and the ones that aren't. And I can say things like, it's good to think about an established community that already has staffing, because staffing is a big issue with retirement communities, I think. But I think home health agencies, all of these people who are there trying to get the senior business. I think if I were beginning a sponsorship program, I might not go there first.
All right, Mary Jo.
Yes, it's 11:59, and
Oh.
again, so the other time flies when you're having fun, and this has been an incredibly rich conversation. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Donna. Thank you to everyone who's chimed in. Before we leave, I'd like to ask Elizabeth Hale to say a few words about an upcoming program that we'll have in May. Elizabeth?
Sure, yes, thanks. So our plenary meeting, May 15th, it starts at 9:30 with Business First, will be followed by groups from Arts for the Aging and Encore, which is another arts group, talking about the positives of providing art outlets for seniors, and also ways that you can get connected with the organization. And there'll be breakout panels to talk with them about specific things that different size villages and villages in different areas can do.
Well, thank you. And also at that event, we will be announcing the winners of our Founders Award. If your villages have not applied for a Founders Award, the applications are on our website. We'll be sending out a reminder about it very soon. And those winners will be announced on May 15th. So we hope that some of you are perhaps already busy writing up some very special programs and services that you've done. Again, thank you to Bruce. Thank you to Donna. I think it's been very rich, and be sure in a few days to look on our website at our WAVE archives, and you'll find the slides and our materials. And you can always reach me at president@wavevillages.org. It actually goes right into my own email, and I'd be happy to connect with any of you. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.